Welcome back after fellowship time. I'll invite Richard Norman to please introduce our two speakers.
Before introducing the two speakers, this photograph is of trees on Lambton Quay, which is part of how long this club's been involved in on-the-ground conservation. In the late 1960s, Roy Mackenzie, in the period he was president of the club, founded a city beautification organisation which set about persuading, cajoling the city engineers that plants could actually be placed in the centre of the city without wrecking their drains. And as far as I can tell, the plants along Lambton Quay were part of that very early process. And this club's been planting every year, basically, since 1967. So that's the background to this project. And our speakers today are going to provide quite different perspectives. The first is a forest and bird perspective from Jess Winchester, who has stepped in this morning to cover for Hone McGregor, who's the Chief Executive of Forest and Bird. I'll say a little bit more about Jess and her background, but I'd also like to introduce Ed Trugidja, who, there we go, it's Trugidja, is Ed's surname, and Ed's the Wellington manager of Conservation Volunteers, which is the new kid on the conservation block locally, is very substantial in Australia, is operating out of the old Truby King home up in Melrose, and Ed will tell you more about their model of getting people involved in the volunteering and weekday activities of conservation. So a bit more introduction about Forest and Bird and Jess, and I'll invite Jess to talk about the broader picture of the future of nature in New Zealand and the role that Forest and Bird plays. Forest and Bird was founded, as I mentioned earlier, 1923, February, a meeting in Wellington called by, now it's Sanderson, isn't it? Colonel, he was Captain Sanderson, who wanted to agitate about the state of Kapiti Island in particular and create a conservation organisation that could do some practical work. So they're very close to in age to us. Jess is the relationship manager, fundraising manager for Forest and Bird. She's been in New Zealand for a year, UK background, and has worked for charity purposes such as hospice, animal welfare, and one really interesting, distinctive one is in Bristol. She came from the Bristol area, and the Isambard Kingdom Brunel ship, the SS Britain, which is one of the major tourist attractions there. So Jess, please welcome forward. Jess is going to give us about 10 minutes, and then Ed will give us a background as well.
Okay, thank you ever so much for having me here today. Our apologies that Hone McGregor can't make it. Unfortunately, he's been struck down with a lurgy, and I think I'm still recovering from one as well, so apologies if I descend into a coughing fit. I'll try my best to keep on track. A lot of people ask me, you know, what brings you from the UK to New Zealand, and especially to Forest and Bird. And I always felt like New Zealand would work for me, that I would feel at home here. And I came over about 2 years ago for a bit of a recce with my husband, and we bombed around both islands in the course of a month, and we clattered down from the top of the north to the bottom of the south, and I thought, wow, this is amazing, this country is just awesome. But it wasn't until I went on a boat trip on Doubtful Sound, and the pilot of the boat killed the engines, and you get that absolute stillness. And I thought, wow, actually this is really what it's about. This is mind-blowing. And from that point on, I made it my mission to find a role over here where I could actually contribute and help save and protect your incredible environment. So that's why I'm here. And it's a real privilege to be able to work for Forest and Bird and to be able to help them to raise the vital funds they need to help protect everything that you hold so close to your hearts. So I'm going to talk to you about the future of nature in New Zealand and Forest and Bird's big strategy It is an ambitious strategy that we have, lots of big chunky goals, which I will go through right now. So, this is where we are right now. 142 New Zealand species now considered more at risk than they were in 2008. What have we been doing? How did we let it get to this point? The situation has got so much worse, and we really do need to do something about it, and that's what Forest and Bird is here to do. So at the moment, 74% of New Zealand's native freshwater species are in danger of extinction. 2/3 of monitored rivers are deemed unsafe to swim in. As a country, we are slowly poisoning the lifeblood of our environment with intensive farming, poor water quality controls and ineffective legislation. And you can see here, these are the ghost forests of Northland. That's the impact that predators, possums in particular, are having on a very important piece of your land in the north. And we are doing everything we can to stop that from happening. I think it's pretty clear to all of us that New Zealand is far from clean and green. Nature is rapidly becoming lost at sea. Our precious New Zealand sea lion, shown here, is another victim of a weakly protected marine environment and poorly managed fisheries. Through lack of effective protection, we continue to see these declines in populations of many of our most important seabirds and species like Maui's and Hector's dolphins, the rarest and smallest dolphins in the world. And we're also seeing increasing negative impacts on our marine environment and the plants and animals that live there. And this chap is going to be affected by climate change. Things are really hotting up for nature. 2015 was the hottest year for the world since records began in 1880. 2016 is set to be the warmest year on Earth ever recorded. From this yellow-eyed penguin to the tuatara, climate change will impact on the most vulnerable of our species first. The question is, who's defending nature while all this is going on, and who is protecting our future? I think it's pretty clear that nature is our greatest treasure in New Zealand. Every single day, New Zealanders are physically, emotionally and economically enriched by the environment in which we live. So protecting this taonga is a massively important responsibility for all of us. It's our responsibility, that's mine and yours, to leave a healthier, more resilient world for our children and for future generations. And this is some of those younger generations already taking action. So this was our climate change march back in November. We have over 70,000 members and donors at Forest and Bird. On social media, we have 90,000 followers, which gives us this incredible network of close to 800,000 people or more every single month that we reach out to. That's not a patch on you guys in Rotary, but you know, we're sort of getting there. These amazing individuals, just like you, care about the world we'll leave behind. They join us on marches, they sign petitions, they roll up their sleeves and clear riverbeds, they plant trees, they grow native plants in local nurseries. They sign petitions, they lobby government, and they advocate for change in their own communities. Every single year they volunteer thousands of hours to protect the environment they love. And they put their money where their mouth is. They help us go to court and take action against the big guns who are trying to threaten everything that you hold so dear. Together, we speak up for the little guy who can't speak for himself. Together, that's people, again, like you and me. We're the voice for nature, and we're going to shout even louder with your help. Okay, I'm not going to try and attempt to read that. This was Hone's presentation. I'm good, but I'm not that good. But the important thing about this sentence, this proverb in Maori, it translates as, when man disappears from sight, the land remains. And it's used to demonstrate the respect we give to Mother Earth, who created all things. Unfortunately, man isn't going to go away, and man is our biggest problem. So we really need a strategy to undo the damage and to restore nature to New Zealand. So that's, you know, right now we're looking at predators, pests and weeds that continue to eat through our native species and disrupt ecosystems. Good management of our public conservation land is threatened by the lack of government commitment and funding. Important parts of our economy are ecologically unsustainable, and most of our threatened species, so those 142 species that are now more at risk than ever before, don't even have a management plan. So, is it all doom and gloom? We like to think not. So at Forest and Bird, we believe we can all have an impact on nature in New Zealand, and we have a plan to get us there. So that's our vision. So New Zealand, where ecological resilience is at the heart of everything we do, and our mission is to protect and restore nature in New Zealand. So these are our broad goals. We basically want a safe climate and resilient economy, which means that by 2040, we want to have reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 70% or more from the 1990 baseline. We want a carbon neutral New Zealand, one with measures in place that increase biodiversity resilience against climate disruption. And we really want primary industries to be actively protecting and enhancing biodiversity, and really, working hand in hand with nature to protect everything. And we've probably one of our biggest goals, and I was talking to someone earlier on, is about predator-free work. So we want to have eradicated introduced predators from all of New Zealand by 2040. We want nature within protected areas to be secure and well managed. So this means again that predators have been removed, that conservation land is secure from all significant pests and weed threats, that protected areas on land have been expanded, so we're really making the most of the treasures that we have healthy oceans, our marine biodiversity is recovering, that all indigenous species loss has been halted, threatened species are recovering and their habitats are fully protected. So those are pretty significant goals, and it doesn't end there. So we're also looking at indigenous biodiversity is flourishing in urban centres, and that's where your work with the forest in the heart of Wellington comes in. That will help to reach this incredible goal. We want all freshwater and estuarine habitats and species to be healthy, and that all indigenous species are protected and recovering throughout their migration range. And to get there, we need to be a united and resilient organisation. So again, that's making the most of our 50 branches, our incredible network of people throughout New Zealand who really care and love everything that they do to protect it. So, the future of New Zealand's nature. What can you do today? I want you to think about what will be your legacy to New Zealand. Who would have thought maybe even as little as 5 years ago that kaka would be flying over our backyards in Wellington? Is anyone lucky enough to have that? Yeah, so that's brilliant. And who would have thought it, 5-10 years ago, that would even be possible? And it just shows the incredible impact that conservation can have on an urban centre. Just yesterday, I live in Hataitai, and just yesterday 2 kakariki flew past the window, and that's the first time I've seen them in a whole year. It's an incredible privilege to live in a city the size of Wellington and to have that engagement with nature. Forest and Bird has a landscape changing plan, but we know we can get there with your support. We can only achieve it together. So I'd like, as I said, to challenge you to think of your legacy to nature. I really encourage you to get involved. I know you already are, but you can always bring in more people. Use your networks, open up your address books, introduce them to conservation in New Zealand, introduce them to Forest and Bird. See the native plants and birds return in even greater numbers to our city. Watch the population of little blue penguins thrive on your doorstep down by the sea. It's an incredible opportunity for you to really get stuck in. And finally, I know you're all incredibly generous. You have a reputation as an organisation around the world for making a difference to organisations big and small. But really think about making a gift to nature. Nothing quite beats the feeling of knowing you personally will play a role in the survival of a species. But above all, do something today, even if it's just talk to me or Ed afterwards. Give us your contact details, share your contacts and your friendships with other people, and really help to extend it so that we're all collaborating together to make New Zealand's nature safe for the future. Basically, The future of New Zealand's nature is sitting right here in this room today. You're the future for nature in New Zealand. Thank you.
How about that for a stand-in? Ed Tregidja, who's Conservation Volunteers Wellington Manager, and I've asked Ed to give us a 3 or 4 minute overview of the project, and then we'll take questions.
Good day, everyone. So I'm the Regional Manager for Conservation Volunteers New Zealand in Wellington. So I'm just going to give you a really quick overview of our organisation, a little bit of our history and what we do, and then how we're going to assist with the forest at the heart of Wellington. So we're a not-for-profit charitable trust established in New Zealand 10 years ago. We've got offices in Auckland, Wellington, Punakaiki, Christchurch and Dunedin. And we're part of the larger organisation which is Conservation Volunteers. Conservation Volunteers was established in Australia in the 1980s, where we've got over 50 offices and are now the largest practical conservation organisation outside of government in Australasia. Just a few stats there. Since our time in New Zealand, we've planted over 750,000 trees across the country and engaged volunteers for more than 500,000 hours. So our vision is to inspire change by connecting people to nature to sustain life. What we actually do on the ground is many and varied, but in a nutshell, we provide a vehicle for people to get involved in conservation volunteering. So our goal is to make volunteering as safe, easy and accessible to the general public as possible. Everything we do is in partnership, so we're a not-for-profit and we don't own land. So we partner with central government, local government, land managers and other NGOs, corporate organisations, iwi and philanthropics to do the good work that we do and realise our vision. So that's all I'm going to say about us, but I'll move on to a forest at the heart of Wellington. So when Richard first approached me at the start of this year about this project, I sort of listened to what the goals were to plant 100,000 trees total across the town belt centred on Mount Victoria. And I thought this was a really great project. It's a really substantial contribution to conservation across Wellington, providing a vital piece in the puzzle of ecosystems across the city for all the wildlife that's moving out of Zealandia and across the town belt. Just to put that into perspective, the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment recently released a report saying that the best way we can possibly address 5 out of 6 of the biggest environmental problems facing mankind is by planting trees. So that's a pretty strong mandate to be doing this project. So I was obviously really keen to get conservation volunteers involved in helping you guys achieve this project, and we've been working on it from there. So in order to achieve the goal of bringing the total number of plants planted from 35,000 up to 100,000, we need to bring the annual plantings from where they are now at around about 3,500 up to more than 10,000 plants per year. To do that, we need to construct and operate a nursery, get a seed collection and propagation program and a site maintenance program. So that's what Richard referred to as tree releasing, which is kind of a friendly way to refer to weeding around plantings after they've been put in place. And that's just to make sure that planting a tree isn't the only part of the piece of the puzzle. We need to come back for 2 to 3 years afterwards and make sure the forest reaches maturity. So where we are at with that at the moment, since meeting Richard, we've developed a project plan and budget until 2023, and we've applied to a couple of major funding pools to start the establishment phase of that project. We've got agreement from Wellington City Council that the project plan is in line with what they'd like to see happening across the town belt, and they've committed to helping support the project by doing all of the site preparation we need. We've got very broad community support. The Wellington branch of Forest and Bird have enthusiastically got behind the project, and they're going to help market all of the volunteering opportunities to their members. And then I guess where we are now is we're looking for other sponsors and other partners to come on board and help us achieve what the project has to go. So that's all I've really got to say today, but I'll also say I've just left a little information brochure on all of the tables with a bit more about what our plans for the project are and where we're going from here. Thank you.
So, questions, please.
So is it achievable?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yep.
A question about volunteers in terms of understanding who's volunteering and the age profile. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yep. So we essentially take anyone as a volunteer. So in Wellington, we've got, outside of this project, we've got different volunteer projects happening on the ground Monday to Friday every day, and then on the weekends we have larger community events. So all of our Monday to Friday and weekend events are advertised to the general public. Anyone who wants can sign up on a day-by-day basis. And then outside of that, we also engage school groups, corporate team building and things like that. And then other community groups will come and work with us. In Wellington, we've also got one other program, which is an international volunteer program, where international people will sign up from overseas. They'll come and stay with us at the Truby King House in Melrose for anywhere from a week up to 3 or 4 months, and then they'll work on our projects Monday through Friday and help us achieve our goals.
Chris.
This one's for Jess. Jess, there seems to be a plethora of organisations in this area across your sort of bailiwick, as it were. Wouldn't it be better if you all got together and worked together?
Yeah, that's a particular personal bugbear of mine, is that particularly within the conservation world, you do have a large number of organisations that want to do incredible things and have big goals, and I personally feel that if we all did work together, then we could have such a much more impressive impact than working in isolation when you think of the shared administration and overheads, you know. But I think, you know, Wellington particularly, is what I love about New Zealand, is there is that sense of openness, there is that opportunity to connect. And I think, you know, especially Forest and Bird, we are in a position where we can reach out to other organisations. So, as Ed said, our Wellington branch is incredibly enthusiastic about the project to create the Forest at the Heart of Wellington. But we also, through our branches, have incredible connections throughout the whole of New Zealand. So, but yeah, I agree. It would be great if we had someone or some organisation that could pull everything together so that we'd have a bigger impact.
Helen?
So taking that question further, I know that one of the Department of Conservation's roles is to work with community groups and volunteers. How do both of you interact with DOC, and are you part of some umbrella that they operate?
So, Conservation Volunteers New Zealand, we have an MOU with DOC at the national level, and we work in partnership on individual projects around the country. So it's ad hoc here and there, but we're completely separate organisations, but we work together on a lot of things. We have actually just seconded a DOC staff for a day a week for the next 6 months to help us develop a couple of programs that we're working on. Yeah.
So Forest and Bird has an interesting relationship with DOC, as many of you may have seen. Interestingly, Forest and Bird was responsible through our campaigning to get the Department for Conservation established. So we're very proud of that achievement and our continuing relationship with the department. We like to think that we keep DOC honest and on the straight and narrow, so we're not afraid to go out and challenge any decisions that they make that aren't in the best interests of conservation in New Zealand. We appreciate that DOC is a government department, that their focus may be swayed by the politics of the day. Above all, Forest and Bird is here to protect and save nature in New Zealand. But we do have a very close relationship with DOC. We work with them on a number of the key recovery groups, so we're working with them on the Kakapo recovery group, Kiwi recovery, the Blue Duck, basically we do go hand in hand, but we're not afraid to give them a slap if they step out of line.
One more question, time for. Any more questions?
Jess, is there any traction being made in bringing pressure to bear on the dairy industry?
That's always a really contentious issue. It's not. I'm not the best person to talk in detail about the dairy industry and forest and bird. I can access some information for you if you're really interested. It continues to be one of the biggest threats to nature, and particularly our freshwater. One of our goals, as I was talking about before, was to engage with primary industry and get to a point where they see the value in nature and also in working with nature rather than having practices that aren't sustainable or aren't environmentally friendly. So it's a big challenge for us. I'm sorry I can't answer it more clearly.
Just to provide some thanks, I think one question. How many members of Forest and Bird in this room? It's not bad. Could be better, couldn't it, Jess? So my thanks, I guess the best possible thanks for our speakers is the active engagement of this project. And please do talk with Jess and Ed afterwards. The support that Ed's provided really makes that 100,000 feasible. So can we give a round of applause to our speakers, please?
Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Ed. I also want to thank Richard, who's done the introducing and thanking, but the Forest at the Heart of Wellington, Richard is the driving force behind that. It's a huge ambition. It was a huge legacy for our club and our centennial coming up, and I would ask you to get behind it. From a board perspective, the relationships that are outlined today are really important. We have a whole range of things. One is the Forest at the Heart of Wellington. Two, we have ongoing planting, as you appreciate, and we've got another one coming up, I think, on the 6th of August. We've got vermin control that the board are also sponsoring, and with Scope and Yusuf, we've got car boxes that we're help sponsoring as well. So there's a whole range of projects and initiatives that our club in the environmental space are helping to foster or develop. So Richard, thank you for pulling today together, and thank you personally for what you're doing at the Forest at the Heart of Wellington. It's a huge ambition, but it stands us all in good stead. Are there members with interesting notices?
I'll defer to experience. John, you can go first.
Thank you, President. Members, may I just remind you that the early bird tickets for the Singers event end on the 20th of July. So you've got until then to pay $120 per ticket, and then after that it's $140. Tickets are selling well, I'm glad to say.
President Mark and members, I'd like you all to get out your calendars and mark September the 17th in there. Many of you will recall we had a pretty successful event last year, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, which was a great social event. And for those that don't know what this is about, we invite people to register as either a host or a guest, and we'll put together dinner parties, and no one's going to know where they're going or who's coming to your dinner party until we've had the event. Will be much more details will come out, but please note that date, September the 17th, is when we'll be having Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Stuart also asked me to remind you that on the table is the 2016 wine options evening, Sunday the 7th of August at the Wellesley Boutique Hotel. Please do, it's a great evening and you have a lot of fun. It's more than wine tasting, it's a nice social event for the club. And we'll do a wee bit of a practice, I think, at some point one Monday before this. So please do consider it, and please do put your name down for it. Just as we finish this day in history, I'm only going to finish on one point, that on this day in 1987, the world's population reached 5 billion. And 24 years later, had reached 7 billion. The impact of human beings on this planet is huge, and the more we can do to support such the speakers that we've heard today, the better we all will be. And I know that's a truism for my daughters as well, which are only in their early 20s. Thanks very much. Go out and make a difference with service above self. Thank you, and see you next week.